newspapers, or was written in the newspapers in England. I don't know what paper it was in, but many years after the war, I don't know if it was the Evening Standard that it was in, the family of the history of the family Fabrizi, which my cousin Mario Fabrizi became a film star in his early stages, that used to act with Peter Sellers, Tony Hancock and Terry Thomas and people like that. And he then became the Count, and now that he's dead, he has a son who is still nominated Count Fabrizi. I believe the family were a very well-to-do family at one time, very well educated, very much a good upbringing, that lived in Tuscany, came from Tuscany.
Goes back to the Borgias, doesn't it, or something like that?
No, it goes right back to the 11th century, when the Pope made the first count.
Right.
The first Count Fabrizi, and it carried on from there.
So if Mario's son doesn't have any children,
well, then the line will be finished.
It can't go through the mother's side.
I don't think so. I think it only went through the males, because there's only one Fabrizi left alive today, a genuine Fabrizi from the old family, and that's WW2, who's a monk. And I don't know, owing to the no, he couldn't take it. He might take the title, I don't know, if Mario's son dies, because he'll be the only genuine Fabrizi left from the original family.
Yes.
You know, sort of, because I don't know what really happens there.
Yeah.
I don't really know. But all I know is that I had a very much privileged life when I was younger. And in a way...
They wanted you to marry some very
ugly
lady?
They sent me to a monastery in Italy to get married because of the status of our family. It happened to me and my brother. And they sent me to a monastery called San Etizio, going towards Rome, that end of the world. And I stayed in there for over a month to teach me how to walk, talk, sit down, how to approach people, which to me was a pain in the neck. Having come from England, I didn't do all those kind of things. But anyway, they sent me there purposely, without me knowing. They had arranged a marriage between the La Marchese, I don't know what you call them in English, the Marquis di Soriano. And if I'd have passed all my exams, they wanted me to marry her. Of course, when the time came for me to get married to the girl, I actually met the family, and the mother, there was a photo of the mother over the fireplace in the villa, and to me it was something I'd never seen in my life, the type of villa that it was. Oh God. And it was fantastic. Anyway, in this villa there was a photo of the mother over the fireplace, and she was a very, very beautiful woman, a very beautiful woman. And being a young man, I thought to myself, well, if the daughter's like this, there's no argument. But I didn't know too well. I was told what was involved, but it didn't count for much at the time to me, because I didn't believe in all that. Anyway, when they brought the daughter out, no way could I have ever married that girl, because being young, you went for beauty and everything else, and not for a real type of woman. Consequences, anyway, I knew I could not marry, and I didn't, because then I realised, or they told me, because of the status of our family and being allowed to marry into society circles, I had just turned down several $1 million as a wedding dowry, but I couldn't care less. I couldn't have married the girl, and that was it. My brother was exactly the same with another one.
What happened to these? These were pretty wealthy heiresses, weren't they? No?
Oh well, I don't know how many $1 million. It was several $1 million anyway. If I married the girl, and I would have been sent to college for 4 years to be trained to have a specific kind of, like a solicitor or a lawyer or a doctor or something like that, to keep up with the family itself. And I had a villa in Switzerland, I think it was, and I think they had a place in France.
How old were
I
you
was
then?
about 23, I think, 22, 23 then.
So this would be,
Yeah,
this was just
just
after
after the war.
After the war,
Yeah, just after the war. I
Yeah.
think I was about that age, I must have been. Anyway, I didn't marry her, and it didn't mean much to me whether it was Count Fabrizi or Jack the steamroller driver down the road. I was
Yes.
quite happy as I was.
Yeah.
But I must say that I did love Italy very, very much.
And your Italian at that point was perfect, was it?
No, I gathered Italian a lot more after that, because I got mixed up with Count Paci, Count Arnaldo, what was the name of the other one, big shipbuilder he was and everything else. And as a matter of fact, I think I was taken to a villa where some of the family Bourget used to live as well. You know, they had the rings and all that in a case of what they used, and supposed to be poison rings and all that. No, I lived quite a privileged life in those days, but I was very much akin and very much in love with the farmers, because I could see how hard they worked to make a living. I used to go and eat in their homes, sometimes without my grandmother knowing, and all that business. But it was marvellous, it was wonderful, and I thought these poor people, you know, but they seemed very happy. That's what I could never understand. I could never understand how happy they were.
So you got a letter from your father to come back, but
yes.
if you hadn't have got that letter, you would have.
No,
said,
if I hadn't have got a letter from my father, it was written from my brother, and this was after the war, by the way.
Yeah.
After the war. About 1946, 47, somewhere around about that period, that he was very ill. Would I come back? Of course I came back, and my father was not ill at all. The reasons why he made me come back from Italy, I think he knew that I wouldn't have come back, and I didn't want to come back at the time. But having said that, I must say one thing about England, like my father said to me as well. He said, son, he said, all right, we love Italy. He said, I love Italy. He said, I am an Italian. I got in terms because I wouldn't change to become English. He said, but remember one thing, son. I couldn't do that because I'm Italian born and I feel Italian. Due respect, I've got nothing against England. He said, I've got more against Italy for coming in the war against England. But, he said, remember one thing, son. He said, you've made your living in this country. He said, I've made my living in this country. So therefore, you will respect this country for what it's given us. And I must say, now that I'm much, much older, I realise how much really England was free in many, many ways, and a very, very nice place to live in. But to me, I think England went all cockeyed, upside down, all messed up during the Margaret Thatcher era. That's when I think England started going down, because of the so-called freedom and liberation that the people got, you know, especially the young people went crazy and everything else under the sun.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Well, anyway, that's how I feel.
But so bit we didn't cover really, I think, which was a really big day in the life of this country, was the day that war was declared. And you were in the shop, weren't you?
When war was declared on England by the Germans, this
Yeah.
before my father knew that Italy was going in. He had an
Yeah.
idea they would, but I was in the shop, and I was waiting for my dad to come out because he had his dinner, then he'd come out. And I thought, he's a little late today, so I went in to see what was going on. And he was sitting down at the table, listening to the radio, he was crying his eyes out. I thought he was ill. And I said, what's wrong, Dad? He said, son, he said, this world is crazy, it's mad. He said, they've just declared war. I said, well, Dad, I said, it's war, it's war. He said, but they don't realise what war means. He said, human beings, I don't know what's wrong with them. He said, it's all hip hip hooray and jolly good show and all that sort of lot. He said, but if they realised what it really meant, he said they'd be doing the same as me, breaking their heart. And but later on I did realise what my dad went, because when I got called up, although I was never sent abroad, I did realise a few things that went on while I was in the army. I was machine gunned from the air once or twice, and one time I got blown up as well, about 3 times. but always in this country, which seemed to me totally unfair, but there you are. They wouldn't let me go abroad, which I never found out till when I got discharged in 1943, that because of my dual nationality, I could have been in a lot of trouble in Italy or Germany if I'd have been made a prisoner of war. The only thing I ever regretted being in the army was that I never liked the army, to be honest with you, although I was very, very fit, treated very, very well, never considered as a foreigner, which was very good, but I was so upset that because of what I know now, dual nationality, I could not join the Air Force, and that upset me very, very much indeed, which made me feel I did not want a soldier, because it's not what I wanted to do. Anyway, cutting a long story short in that respect, the one thing that amazed me about the British people was when we had the bombings in London, because I went in the army in 42 and came out in 43.
So you had the big bombings in 1940,
yeah,
41. Yeah,
41, around that time. One thing I must say about what I can remember of it, it was a terrible, terrible times. But I've never, in my mind, I could never visualise any other nation apart maybe from Germany, I don't know, because we're very much the same English people, that they never complained, hardly ever complained, whatever happened to them, the old story, the old stiff upper lip business and that, and the English people in general were very calm, very cool, very collected, and never once hardly ever heard that they were going to lose the war. And I've got to give them 100% credit for that, because they did suffer a great deal. As civilians, they suffered a great deal. But
what was, if you go back to that time, what was the closest you came in the Blitz to being bombed yourself?
When they set the city alight. When they set the city alight, I was up in Long Lane, Smithfield Meat Market. I'll never forget that night as long as I live. The whole of the city was burning, and somehow or another, I can't remember, I know I got a lift here and a lift there from cars, which weren't many about. I got a lift on a lorry and I got back to Hornsey where I lived, and I went into the back garden and I could read a newspaper in my back garden from the fires that were burning in the city, which is approximately 11 miles away from the city, where I got back to. But even with all that, as terrible as it was, I think that the English people, how they really and honestly stuck it properly, I shall never know. Because I'll be honest with you, I didn't like it, and it was awful.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, there's been so many stories of they bombed up the water mains, so they couldn't.
Well, they couldn't pump the water
sometimes.
In the city, the amount of when they were trying to put the fires out, the amount of hose pipes that were hanging around was incredible. I think that some of it was actually drawn out from the Thames itself. I'm not sure.
That's very true. Yeah.
You know, if I remember correctly, because as you get older, I think you're inclined to forget a lot of things. But these kind of things seem to remain in your mind forever. It makes you wonder how foolish human beings can get to a stage of doing what they've done.
Yeah.
What for, I still don't know today. They say it's freedom from oppression and all that kind of business, but I just don't know.
So when you learned to drive in the army,
yeah,
and then you've always liked cars, haven't you?
Yeah, always have done.
So did you get to drive any racing cars?
Once only in my life, and my dad stopped me doing it because he said it was too much of a dangerous game, because one of my cousins, which was my mother's first cousin, is still alive today, Roy Salvadori, and he drove Maseratis and XKs, you know, 120s and all that kind of business. I don't know if ever he won the Le Mans races or not, I'm not sure.
I think he might have won the Le Mans races.
Yeah, I think he did win the Le Mans races.
Yeah. Did you ever go to any races with him?
Yes, I used to go to Silverstone in those days, quite a lot, you know, sort of business. And also, I think, well, as I said, I always would have liked to have been a racing driver, But after that, my father wouldn't let me do it, and one way or another, I've done many other trades, and I found myself in the finish working as a tool maker for chaps, locks and safes.
But you've always liked mechanical work.
Always,
yeah.
always have done all my life.
Yeah, watches and things.
Yeah, well, watches I'm not all that clever on, but I started repairing watches for one reason only, many years, about 40 odd years ago, when they charged me £12 to fit an hairspring into a wristwatch. I let him keep the watch. I said, sell the thing, I'm not paying you. And from there onwards, I thought to myself, I've got to learn to do this, because if I've got to pay £12 for something that costs 90p, well, that's it, finished there. So I went on to model aircraft, fishing rod making, boats, everything I could think of, you know, as long as it was my hands.
Yeah.
That I was using my hands. But I must say that one thing about England, I've always said and I always will, and I think it applies today as well, that if you come to this country, you should live by its laws, as written or spoken, and not try and live your own sort of laws and own ways and your own religion and try to impose that on the country you are living in, which in the year 2003 is upsetting me very much.
Yeah. Do you feel that there's a likelihood that there's going to be a war in this year?
Well, there's a lot of talk about war at the moment with Iraq, and there may be other ways of sorting these things out, which I wish there were, but knowing human beings as they are, and dictators as they are, we've done that in the Second World War, which was a big mistake. We knew what Hitler was going to do, and we just sat down there and did nothing at all, and it took 5 years to resolve something that I think should have never really happened. If England had have been awake and looked at the facts a little bit more, many years before it all started.
But that was, there was a lot of people in England before the Second World War who weren't keen on going to war.
No,
and obviously the black shirts and the brown shirts and all that.
Well, they didn't have much to do with this war business. They only tried to introduce indoctrinate England with fascism, actually, speaking. But the...
do you think England could ever become a fascist country?
Doubt it very much indeed. I doubt it very much indeed. I don't think so. I don't think so.
It's too tolerant, is it?
It's not. It wouldn't tolerate that kind of thing, because I can't say that some of the fascists that were with what was his name? I forget the man's name now. Mosley. His ideals, his way of talking sounded okay, but some of the people that were with him and carried it out weren't very nice people at all.
Did you ever meet any of them?
Well, only once or twice. Well, I must go back before the war now, when my father sent me to, I think it was Felixstowe, to an Italian holiday centre when I was very young. I think I was still at school at the time, I'm not sure. And there I joined what they called a fascist party, and I left it, because what they wanted to do, and the way they were carrying on to me, the leader of the party, and he was only a youngster himself, was a bit of an animal, and I didn't like his ways, and I had to take 13 whippings with a strap to get out of the party, and I did, because I didn't like its attitude at all. But having said that, when I lived in Italy, I can't say that the fascist party, the laws and rules and regulations that existed, never seem that bad to me, as much as I can remember or understand of, because the poorer people had a much fairer deal under Mussolini than they ever had under the old kings and all that kind of business. Because, funny enough, one of my uncles was an instigator, partial instigator of the Garibaldi party when they liberated Italy. I think his name is Nicola Fabrizi. He's got statues in Rome of him and everything, you know, sort of business. And there was quite a bit of politics in our family, one way or another.
Well, they were part of the ruling elite.
Well, at the time, at the time. But all this war business, I'll never understand it, and I don't think it'll ever cure anything. But being that we're human beings, I think a part of it's installed us in us from the very beginning, so
Yeah.
God knows when it'll ever finish.
You know that Agnelli died a few days ago.
Well, yes, he did.
And
yeah.
he's considered a king in Turin.
Well,
they've all been visiting him in his...
No, I've never... you know Evil, the chap, my friend Evil, he was made a Sir Evil, and he knew Agnelli very, very well.
Yeah.
And he went and died, didn't he, poor bugger? And he said one of these days, if I go to Italy, he said I could actually introduce you to him. You know, because I revered Agnelli for what he'd done for Fiat. Other than that, I never knew anything else, what he'd done, what he was, or what type of person he was. But especially, I must say, when Ferraris kept winning, well, 3 cheers for Agnelli.
Okay, that's it.